The Developmental Disabilities Facility Closure Study Commission, whatever you're calling it, will that be for new closures announced, or will that cover the Youngstown and Dayton centers that have already been announced for closure?
It'll cover the current two.
Those two. So will that effectively postpone the closure of those two facilities until the study commission looks at it?
Well, I think they're on a 2-year path on closure, so I don't know if it will postpone them, but it will happen concurrently, and hopefully see what kind of results come out of it.
Can I make an additional comment on that? I have to say, this is part of an overarching federal attempt to dismantle our DD system, quite frankly, in the state of Ohio. They're trying to shut down our developmental centers. They're trying to move away from workshop-based care by not reimbursing us for it through the Medicaid waiver system. And they're saying that our independent providers are committing tax fraud and trying to make the state employees of the independent providers. It's a coordinated effort by the Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, and the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services. And quite frankly, we are getting ready to draw a line in the sand for these families, because it's taken us 4 decades in order to build this developmental disability system to help some of the most vulnerable in our state. And these families have advocated for the system that we currently have, and we don't feel that it's right to kick them out of their homes in the developmental centers. The developmental centers have people that have highly acute needs, highly involved cases, and quite frankly, they need institutional care. And we've gone from 1,200 in the developmental centers now down to 800, and we think that enough is enough, and we want to make sure that we're looking at this more carefully and that we prevent the wholesale closure of these developmental centers.
So can I clarify, is it possible that the action of this study commission could stop the closing of the Youngstown and Dayton developmental centers?
Yes.
That's what our attempt is.
Can I ask for education? You mentioned that you were working toward a work requirement for substantive staff. Does that mean it's in the budget?
This is one of the pieces that we're running both in the budget and then also separately as a separate bill, so we can get more focus on it and begin to look at it clearly. Obviously, we don't want to kick people off the system prematurely, but we feel like there has to be a time limit for being on the governmental programs, and a time limit for also, there comes a time when people need to get back to work, and so we're going to examine that.
If I could add just a bit to that, the administration's proposal, I think rightly, is primarily focused on current work requirements of entitlement programs, which would primarily be folks in work programs on TANF. Our proposal will add to that a voluntary side that's non-entitlement, and that will have the ability to be much more flexible to work with those who might already be on an entitlement program, or with those who are not. Who also there are probably 10 times more folks who need a trajectory up out of poverty that aren't on work programs now. And so we want to start working in that area in addition to the focus that the administration has. We see what they've proposed and what we're thinking about doing in the Healthier Buckeye program as being very compatible and complementary.
We do 2 more questions, and then we got to get this out.
These study committees that you're putting in here on the tax and the education, are you putting a timeline on when they have to have some of their work done so you'd be able to maybe act on it in this general similar?
Well, the Joint Education Oversight Committee, that's a continuing thing, just as JMOC has been and will be. As far as the Tax Commission goes, look, first and foremost, Ohio's doing well. As I said, we're on a good glide path. Things are really well, and I don't think there's a problem to take this opportunity right now to time out a little bit and let everybody catch up. Most importantly, my thing is predictability and allowing companies and others to have that time to know what's coming. So what we want to do is take the opportunity, again, work with the governor and the administration and say, hey, look, we believe in what you're doing, where you're trying to go. Let's put this together in a long-term study commission here that we can all work together as one team, bring in the NFIBs and the chambers and the retail merchants and the Ohio Manufacturing Association, the Manufacturing Policy Alliance, all these groups, and kind of work towards a goal of what's the next scenario to bring us forward. I think it's been 10-some years now since the deal was struck for the 21% reduction in income tax. It's gotten us to where we're currently sitting at. So I think it's high time that we kind of sit together again in the room and start working towards that ultimate goal. I would predict that by the end of at least this General Assembly, we should be able to have strong recommendations going into the next budget to where we can go with that study commission. I mean, we don't want to rush this, and that's our goal, and that's kind of our message. So that's what we're trying to work on. The issues like asking JMOC to review the Medicaid line items and the Grace Commission, I think we're asking those folks to wrap up by the end of this end of this year, so that we can act on them we'll see, what year is it, 15, 16, and make sure that we can progress forward. There's other issues though, like in education. Currently, I think in the sub-bill there's a transportation study committee that will ultimately roll into things like the joint legislative oversight committee, so that we can have this a continuing conversation.
The severance tax, last budget it was in, it got taken out, and the speaker then